Hey class, this is a refresher on what we discussed on Thursday's class of Thursday, February 20th. We're going to be talking briefly about saving your models, putting views on sheets, and I'm going to get a little deeper into some annotation text notes that we'll need for assignment number 1, and we can review this a little more on Tuesday's class. So first, you can see that I have the opening screen or user interface for Revit. If we're creating a new project, we are going to, under the models, hit new. There's going to be a couple choices that you are presented with. Because I create a template for our class to use, we're going to browse for that template. You're going to locate wherever you saved that template, and we're going to just click on the template that you want to open. You're going to hit open. Make sure that when you're creating this project that you are creating a new project and not a project template. And you're going to hit OK. So now that we have a project template open, you'll see there's a starting view that's under drafting views, project startup. This will be what you are presented with when you open the project each time. Down the road, we'll get into if you want to change the starting view for your project. But for now, it's presented here and just goes over some of the deliverables. So once we have a project template open as a new model, we're going to want to go to File, Save As, Project. You're going to go into whatever folder you want. So I'm just going to do test. And you're going to name it whatever the instructions were to save during our class last Thursday. This is going to be rock test. We're going to save. Once you have saved the project, we're going to go up to this tab called Collaborate. We're going to hit this button over here called Collaborate. It's going to present you with this option. You want to say within your network. We're going to hit OK. It's going to load for a little bit while it's setting up the project collaboration. And once it does that, once you no longer have the loading circle, we're going to go back and we're going to hit Save As, Project. And you're just going to save over that file save that you created. All right. So once that's done, what we're going to do is we're going to close out the project so that you go back to the main screen here. We're going to go back to Open, but this time, instead of opening, or instead of the new project, we're going to open the project we just created. Before you proceed forward, after you select the file, there's a couple things to note down here. There's a create new local, detach from central, audit. You want to make sure that if you want to continue working in this file, that you have create new local checked and detach from central and audit unchecked. So once you confirm that these three options are correct, you are just going to hit open. And now we can begin working in the project. One thing to note that what this helps is you can see if you don't create a collaboration model, Revit will save a bunch of different iterations on your computer with 4 different numbers labeled 0.001, 002, 003, and it'll continue to label them with different iterations. Setting up a collaboration model will help prevent this from happening, as it'll create a backup folder, a temp folder, and then you can see it's just this one Revit model that we're working with, and you don't have to worry about all the different iterations of models. So once we're in here, just reviewing some of the other items that we've gone over, our views are in our project browser. We have a properties tab. If any of these disappear, if you go under the view tab and hit user interface, you can check these different boxes to make sure that they are open so you can navigate with them. So for this project, we can go to our site plan first. We're going to do a quick import of the CAD, in which we went over in our last video. I'm just going to do a quick import here. And as a reminder, you have your thin lines tool up here, so it allows you to be more precise with your moves or with your model. I'm going to move this model at the intersection so that the corner of the building is at the intersection of the two grid lines. So we have the two grid lines now showing at the corner of the building. So the other thing that we discussed and went over in Thursday's class is putting views onto sheets and modifying views scales, titles, and other options. So just for reference, and the purpose of this video, I'm going to delete that view. But remember, all your views, even if you delete them from a sheet, as long as you created them as either drafting view, floor plan, they will remain in your project browser unless you delete the view itself under the project viewer. So because I deleted this site from the sheet, it will no longer show blue as being a reference on or referenced on a sheet or placed on a sheet. But what we can do is under our project browser, just drag and drop that view onto the sheet. You can see our scale doesn't really populate our entire drawing. So we use our own discretion and expertise to assess what an appropriate scale is for the site plan. I want to be able to show a little bit more information. So I can click on the view, and under your properties, there's a option called view scale, and you can change it accordingly to however you need to fit on the sheet. Don't be afraid of having a little white space on a sheet. If you can't fit everything on there, generate a new sheet as needed. One thing to note, so typical standards for titling a view, you want to make sure that it has the line that extends across, a view number, a scale, and a title view. If it doesn't have that information, you can click on the view, drop down, and there's a bunch of different options. The option we want to be using for most of our semester project is going to be this viewport with title. And you can see a line is now created. In order to adjust the length of that line, if you click on the view itself, you can see a little dot is brought up. We're going to extend that out. And there you go. So now we can just adjust the view, move it accordingly on the sheet so that we like the location of it. So some of the things that we didn't discuss in class. So once you have a view placed on a sheet, you can double click in it and you can now work in this space. If you notice the sheet gets grayed out, I won't be able to select it, and that's because I have activated this viewport. I can double click outside of the space, which then will allow me to activate or modify or select the title block. When I go back into the viewport, you are essentially working within whatever view that is placed. So because this is the site plan, which is this site view right here under the project browser, anything I do here, such as going to annotate, adding text, and creating a note saying handicap parking. If I now go to the site view itself, you can see that it has populated that view. That's because when you're working within that viewport on the sheet, it's also working within this view. Note, I can make a text note and do the same thing while I'm just in the sheet space and not clicked in the viewport itself. If I type in handicap parking, because I didn't activate the viewport, if I go to the view, you can see it's not located there. And that's because I'm essentially overlaying text on the sheet space of that view. So you want to try and avoid that as much as possible. Make sure you're always working within the viewport or just working in the view itself and then going back out. As a reminder, when you click on a view, you have the extents properties here, crop region visible, crop region view, and annotation crop. So these are different items that will help you with your extents in case your drawing extends over, top, or past your title block. So when you click on the view and you check crop region visible and crop view, you will be able to pull this line and crop as needed. So we want to adjust it to make sure that it's within the sheet space and won't cut off. Annotation crop, if we have text notes or lines that are 2D, it will crop that out if it extends past the viewport. So you can see as I move this, once it gets past a certain threshold, it disappears and you won't see it. But if I bring the crop region visible, you can now see it. So don't forget about your crop regions. And then personally, I prefer, once I am happy or satisfied with my crop region, I will click crop view and then hide the region so I don't see the line that borders the view anymore. Okay. So we went over detail lines and filled regions in the previous video, and you should have been using them to create some sort of site plan, site design that we'll be using to call out elements, detail features, elevation views, etc. So we want to talk about now using text tools and then also using the dimension tool. For the purpose of our first assignment, we're going to be providing general dimensions of the building and some of the site elements. So what we're going to want to do is when you go into the Annotate tool tab, there are a bunch of different options for dimension. There's a bunch of different options under detail, which we have gone over detail and region so far. Then there's also text tools, and there's also some detail groups, which we'll get into further down the road into the semester. For now, we're going to select the Annotate Align tool. And what this is going to allow you to do is simply click on certain lines and dimension to. So because we know that this grid line is the face of this building here, we can click on that grid line, and then we want to dimension the whole building for the site plan. And we're going to click on that. So here you can see it's only in inches. Standard practice is to be in feet and in inches, especially on a site plan. So one thing you can do if this is appearing like this, you can click on the dimension line. Under properties, we can drop down. You can see that linear 3/32 aerial inches is selected. If we just do linear 3/32 aerial, you can see it switches to a foot and inch unit. So now that we have dimensions in, note a good standard practice is to do multiple lines of dimensions. And this is so that it gives you an overall, and then it gives you sub dimensions. In Tuesday's class, we will be linking in the REVIT model of the building, and we'll be using the grid lines that are existing within the building to dimension to the structural grid. For now, we're only going to be dimensioning to the overall, and then I would like to dimension to the building elements themselves here. So just going to do a couple for demonstration. So one other thing to note, good practice is to not have inches as much as possible. Or so this 4 foot, 1.5 inch, it really should be dimensioned at 4 feet. What might be happening is there's certain reveals, and I think the finished face of the building is actually this line here, and this is just a brick sweep. So I'm going to actually align so that the actual corner of the building is aligned with this grid. So now you can see there's a whole number, 4 feet. And it looks like we did the same thing here. So we're going to, when you're working with dimensions, one thing to note, there's 2 tabs or 2 dots that appear when you have a dimension line selected on each end. This one allows you to adjust the length of or the extension of that dimension line. This second one allows you to change either what it's dimensioning to or reselect what you're dimensioning to. So sometimes you're not going to be able to get a perfect number based off certain restrictions. If you can't get it to work to be a perfect number, try to get it as close as possible. Another thing to notice while you're working with dimension lines, if I am to pull this out, you can see a dashed line appears when I get to a certain point in relationship to another dimension line, and you see it kind of snaps into place. It's a good organization tool and to keep your drawings aesthetically organized, to try and maintain that spacing throughout. The other thing that we saw very briefly was inserting text notes. So in order to add a text note into a view, we can go to the Annotate tool and hit text. Under the Modify tool, once you select text, there's a bunch of different options. You can have no leader, which will remove the arrowhead and the line. You can have two segments, one segment, and an arc leader. Typically, standard practice is to use the one segment, and you can modify the bend as needed. You also have alignment tools, which is similarly to like if you were typing in Word, it can be left aligned, centered, or right aligned. Your text notes will snap to each other, so I'm going to say ADA striping. So if I were to move this, you can see that it snaps into place, and as well as the elbow of the line. And this is another way to keep your drawings organized and aesthetically pleasing and readable for the user. So it's good to maintain consistency if you're going to do left aligned, centered, or right aligned. You can see when I change this to centered, so this is now centered. You can see if I adjust the crop box, the difference between aligning. And if I were to try and snap it to the other line or the other text, you can see it won't snap. So try to be consistent with the alignment of your text. So between text tools and dimensions, we should be able to execute a fairly detailed site plan and serve the purpose of our schematic design of our project. A couple other elements that we're going to talk about Tuesday and Thursday are going to be reviewing elevations and sections and how to put them onto sheets. But to briefly go into it, you can just click on View, hit Elevation, and you can see a little tool comes up, and there's a little caret head. We place and click on that. You can see it will take you to a view. It will generate a view that will appear somewhere in your project browser, which it looks like it got placed under this question marks elevations. What we'll want to do is whatever site feature you have designed, whether it's a planner, what we can do is we're going to be creating a drafting view, and we're going to go into this further Thursday, but we're going to create a drafting view. We can name it planter detail. Once you do a planter detail, I'm just doing a region for now for reference, you can see that this view is being shown under coordination question mark drafting views. If I were to go to my site plans sheet, drag and drop, make sure the view is unselected or not active, drag and drop that view. So we're going to have a planner view detail. If we go back to the site plan, or even better, we can now work and activate the view of the site. We can go back to view, elevation. There's a button up here that says reference other view. And what this allows you to do is reference drafting views, since they are not active or three-dimensional views. You won't be able to take elevations of them within the model space. So you'll need to do what is essentially a dummy tag that doesn't actually reference what's being live modeled, but rather directing you towards a drafting detail that you had executed. So you can find wherever that detail is. So I'm looking for planter detail. You can type to help find or filter what you're looking for. And you can see now I have a view, and if you hit tab, it will rotate the direction in which you're looking at. So when I place this, it'll say A0.1, which is the sheet. View 2 similar. You can uncheck that if you click on the element, hit edit type, and remove the sim. Sometimes if it doesn't work, there's another parameter that is causing it to remain. For this purpose, we're going to leave for now. But if you are looking to remove that sim, it's going to deal with, you're going to have to modify the family, and there will be an option to remove the sim callout. But now you can see we have this view that is calling out view 2 on sheet A0.1, which is what our planner detail is. Okay, so now to wrap everything up, this is the biggest thing when you're saving your model. Rather than going to File, Save As, we instead go up here and hit Synchronize and Modify Settings. It's gonna, if you just click on the box, it'll bring this up. And if you look at all the elements, it will just say View Work Sets, User Created Work Sets, Borrowed Elements. Try to match. You shouldn't have to change any of these options. So if when you're synchronizing they don't match this, modify the options so that they do. You're just going to hit OK. It's going to spin its wheels, and we're synced. So if you hit this button, it's going to close all the views that are active within the project, and then you can just close out. When you close out, there's an option that says Relinquish Elements and Work Sets. Go ahead and just click Relinquish. So one thing I do want to mention, if you open up a project, it's going to come up with this, say Overwrite Existing Copy. If for any reason you're going to sync and it's giving you an error, don't just cancel out. What you should do is go to Save As, Project, go to whatever folder that you're working in, under name the file with like a different version, so you can call it like version 2, save it, and then you're going to want to close out, you're going to open, and then you can see that now something wonky is going on with the model. So in order to get around this, you're going to hit Detach from Central, and you're going to hit Open. You're going to detach and preserve work sets. And this will allow you to work in the file, and then you should be able to save as project and override a certain view. So if you want to override it again, let's say, do you want to replace? You hit yes. And you can close out and just, so then you can see We can create new local again.